This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. As the days get shorter and colder, it can really take a toll on how we feel. Maybe that means calling your grandma, writing a letter to your friend, finally grabbing lunch with someone you haven't seen in a while. And just like reaching out to a friend, starting therapy can take a bit of courage. BetterHelp makes it easy to start therapy. You'll be matched with a licensed therapist based on your needs and preferences so you can focus on your growth and goals. Not happy with your match? You can switch therapists anytime with no hassle. This month, don't wait to reach out, whether that's checking in on a friend or reaching out to a therapist yourself. BetterHelp makes it easier to take that first step. And our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/PFF. That's betterhelp.com/PFF. All right, next game that we have, though, another big noon game. We got Indiana at Penn State, 12 p.m. Eastern time on Fox. Indiana looking for its second straight 10-0 start to a season, and only second in program history as well. So obviously a Cinderella run last year to the college football playoff. They've kept the good times rolling and then some this year. They're off to a 9-0 start once again. The first time ever in program history starting 9-0 in back-to-back seasons. Last year, Indiana started off 10-0 before losing to Ohio State in the 11th game of their season. It was their first 10-0 start ever. And this year, Indiana at 9-0, they're number 2 in the country right now. I'm assuming they'll be somewhere 1, 2, or 3 in the college football playoff ranking. No matter where it is, though, it will be their highest ranking in program history. It's already the highest ranking ever in the AP poll in program history. If Indiana is going to start 10-0 for the second time ever and second year in a row, it'll have to do so on the road against a Penn State team that, yes, is 3-5 and has not beaten a Power 4 team yet, but there still is a lot of talent on that Penn State roster.
Can I throw something at you real quick before I do that?
What?
And a possible future Jet quarterback, Fernando Mendoza. There is a report from Jay Glazer that says it could be a 26 second and a 27 first, which would rock. I'd be so in on that. If we had 3 first-round picks in 2027, anyway, that would rule.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Let's not derail because I know we're starting the video now.
Indiana, Penn State. This was supposed to be a lot bigger game coming into the season, wasn't it? I mean, that's, Penn State has obviously gone what they've gone through, and Indiana's an absolute wagon. But no, this is something where it's one of those games that we talked about them a lot last week, especially in the ACC, where you still have to go on the road and play a talented team, right? Penn State, obviously the quarterback situation, the offense is what it is, but they can still run the football. The offensive line is still good, and the defense still has a lot of NFL caliber talent. So it's not a game, and I think Kurt Cignetti knows this, not a game where you can go down there and mess around and keep this team in the game early, especially with the way their defense can hurt you in those and that defensive line and everything. So, no, certainly still stakes are high. And I think Kurt Cignetti's just one of those coaches that knows, hey, we can't come in here and mess around. So they're certainly not going to.
And I know they lost by 24 last week to Ohio State. So Ohio State did cover last week. Penn State was in that ball game in the second half of that, too. It was like a 3-point game in the second half before Ryan Day remembered he had Julian Sayin, and they started ripping the ball down the field.
Well, I think he doesn't. Against a team like that, especially with Deni Dennis Sutton in a pass rush like Penn State has, you don't want to put too much pressure on your young quarterback. You still want to run the football. I think Penn State did a solid job of stopping the run. They obviously forced the fumble deep in Ohio State territory, and their defense played well for a while, and they ran the football well early in the game. It ended up being the difference of, you have the best quarterback in the country going against a Penn State team that's had a hard time throwing the football this year.
Yep, definitely. All right, you have the Indiana offense with one of the top Heisman candidates right now, maybe future Jet quarterback in Fernando Mendoza. What should we know when they have the ball against Penn State's defense?
Honestly, there's a unit for them I just want to give some credit to, and it's Carter Smith and Pat Coogan and this offensive line. Look, I thought the offensive line was arguably the weakness of this team last year. They're a lot better this year, and in fact, a hell of a lot better this year. Second highest graded offensive line in the country, only behind the Iowa Hawkeyes, who are by far the best this season. We'll get to them later. 8th in run blocking grade, 2nd in pass blocking grade, 7th in pressure rate allowed. You wonder why big reason why Fernando Mendoza has been so successful this year. It's these 5 guys up front mauling people in the run game and protecting him in the passing game. You get a couple of transfer additions in there like Coogan, like Khalil Benson at right tackle from Colorado. They've really had an awesome offensive line this year. The one game that really kind of staggered a bit was the Iowa game, really a hard-fought game in the trenches against a good defensive line. So I think that's the matchup I'm looking at is can Indiana continue to dominate up front against still a very talented defensive line for Penn State. You talk about guys like Denai Dennis Sutton off the edge, Zariah Fisher off the edge, Zane Durant on the interior. They do present one of the more unique challenges for Indiana. So far, they staggered a bit against Iowa. They looked pretty good against Oregon. Took them a bit to get in a rhythm there up front, especially in pass protection. The good thing, I think, though, for Indiana in this game is Penn State, the defense, Jim Knowles' defense, a lot simpler than, say, Tom Allen's or Manny Diaz has been in the past, where usually Indiana has issues with picking up blitzes and things of that nature. Penn State blitzing a lot less this year is much more of a standard 4-man rush. So that's going to be the battle I'm looking at. Can Penn State's defensive line get through this outstanding offensive line and rattle Mendoza and stop the run as well?
Yeah, for the Penn State offense, it's very, very simple. They have to get the ground game going. They're not going to beat the Hoosiers through the air with a backup quarterback in this game with Ethan Grunkmeyer. So can Nittany Lions get, Katron Allen and Nick Singleton going in this game with Drew Aller out for the season? Ethan Grunkmeyer has struggled in his absence. He's a redshirt freshman right now, 50.3 PFF grade, 5th worst mark among 161 FBS quarterbacks with at least 75 dropbacks this year. That compounded with the fact that Penn State's receiving core has also struggled, has made this offense completely one-dimensional. Now, to be fair to Ethan Grunkmeyer, who was a top 10 quarterback coming out of high school a couple years ago, his first 2 starts were against Iowa and against Ohio State. But guess what? Doesn't get any easier this week against Indiana, one of the highest graded defenses in college football. So Penn State, I think, really has to rely on their ground game this week against the Hoosiers. And they've had some success on the ground this year. Right now, 32nd in the country in run blocking grade. Katron Allen is top 15 in the Power 4 in forced missed tackles and in yards after contact this year. But the problem for Penn State is that Indiana is 5th in the nation with a 93.6 run defense grade this year. 7 of the 11 starters on defense for Indiana have at least a 75 run defense grade this year. And Indiana, most likely, is going to stack the box on Penn State and dare Ethan Grunkmeyer to beat its zone coverage, because they've done that before with teams that really only run the ball, like, say, Iowa, for example, which makes it even harder for Penn State to gain an advantage on the ground. So, yes, Grunkmeyer will need to make a couple big throws in this game, but if you're relying on Ethan Grunkmeyer to win you this ball game, Indiana could run away with this one.
I'll tell you what, for all of the assets, all of the things that Indiana has, and they score all of these points, and they have the NFL quarterback and 2 great receivers and all these guys we talk about, I've really believed, going back even to last year's team, that their run defense is the best, most consistent part of their team every single week. Michael Kamara and those guys on the defensive line, Aiden Fisher and Isaiah Jones at the linebacker level are just unbelievable players that get after the football constantly, especially in the run game. You cannot run between the tackles on this Indiana team. That was the case last year, and it's the case again this year. Katron Allen and Nick Singleton are basically the entire Penn State offense right now. This is a brick wall they're running into. If they get it done in this game, kudos to them.
Absolutely. So, ultimately, Dalton, will Penn State get a massive upset at home and their first win over a Power 4 team this year, or will Indiana keep it rolling and go 10-0 again?
Penn State will not do that.
Damn.
I just think You know what it is about these types of games? You see so many games, and we saw a few of them last week, and these good teams, ranked teams, go on the road against conference rivals and things like that, and they mess around, right? Like, they're not ready for the environment, and they take, we're 8-0, we can beat anybody, right? Most teams have that ego. Curt Cignetti does not let his team have that ego. Look, even a little bit of a fight early in the first half against Maryland last week, and then all of a sudden the game was 55-10. When the Avalanche gets going with this Indiana team, good luck to you. He's got the same attitude as Nick Saban, and he used to work under Nick Saban that, yeah, we're going to be on the gas for all 60 minutes. I don't think it's going to be any different here. I've got Indiana 35-10, and the way that Cignetti and his team just pours it on in the second half of these games, I think it could be even worse than that. I think it's possible. I know it's at Penn State. I know it's a big game. It's always loud there, but I think on the field, the big problem is Penn State's playing with a quarterback who's not ready. He's just not ready for this. He wasn't supposed to be starting this year, obviously, right? If it was Drew Aller, I'd go, okay, he's got the experience and he's at least played in these big games for as much as he gets criticized for losing them, obviously. But I think Grunkmeyer, you saw it last week. You've seen it even in his first couple of games. He's not ready for this stage, and they're really working around him and hoping they can just run the ball to any sort of success. I just don't expect Penn State to score very much like I was surprised they scored 14, and really Ryan Day gave him 7 of those.
You know what? I'll give Penn State more than that. I'll say 34-20. I have Indiana.
All right,
this
you
game.
got that's like a hanging in there type game against a number 2 team in the country. That's maybe could be number 1 by the end of tonight. There's some people think they're number 1.
We'll see, but the way they fought against Ohio State last week at Ohio State too, when I thought that there was a chance they'd roll over and die, I was like, you know what? Against Indiana, I think they'll give a little bit of a fight at home in this one too. So I have a 34-20. Still think Indiana's going to win by multiple scores, but I think Penn State's defense will find some success early. Emphasis on some against Indiana. But then I think Indiana's going to tire out that Nittany Lions defense because the Penn State offense is going to struggle putting up a lot of points in this one. This game will be tighter than expected for a while, but I think a lot like the Ohio State game last week, in the second half, I think Indiana and Fernando Mendoza will pull away in the second half and win by 14 points.
Penn State runs a lot less man coverage than they did last year now under Jim Knowles. I wonder if they might get a little more aggressive. Because to me, that's how I would attack this Indiana passing game is let A.J. Harris get in press man against Surratt, get in press man against Omar Cooper. If they beat you downfield, they beat you. But the one thing this Indiana offense doesn't have is a boatload of blazing speed. I think Penn State at least does have the talent at corner to challenge them. I wouldn't have done it as much as they did last week against Ohio State because those two guys are freaks out there. But I think you could try to do that and maybe disrupt the timing a bit with some man coverage, but we'll see how they approach it. I think you're right. The defense is certainly talented enough to keep them in games. The lack of offense, especially in the passing game, is obviously the concern.
Yep. So we both have Indiana winning this game against Penn State, and what is one of Indiana's hardest tests, at least the rest of the regular season.